Hi, welcome to another episode of Unlocking Medicare. I'm your host, Tyrone Carr. Today we have another great special guest. I'm really excited to dive into our conversation with Dr. James Forshee, who I'll actually give you his title, Senior Vice President, Chief Medical Officer, and Executive Medical Director for Priority Health. So welcome today, and I appreciate our conversation and your time to take out of your busy schedule to meet with us. And so unfortunately, you couldn't be here in the office with us, so we're just doing this via Zoom. So good morning to you, and thank you for your time.
Morning. Pleasure. I hope this is useful for you and for your audience. Look forward to it.
Yeah, appreciate that. So you know, our big question today, as we were just talking just a few minutes ago before we actually started recording, was addressing the prior authorizations. So we're seeing that this is coming up more and more often than maybe we'd like. In talking with clients that have engaged with their doctors, I would say doctors are giving us there's pushback as to their disgruntlement with Medicare Advantage plans, saying, well, we deal with prior authorizations and, you know, certain services are declined. And so the information that I was provided with and what I've learned and my understanding is often is, one, it's just another step in the process. You know, when you go back to original Medicare and a Medigap policy, you submit a certain code for that service through Medicare, and once Medicare approves that service, then essentially the Medigap policy has to pay, right? So, and then the plan pays according to the plan that you chose to represent you in the form of healthcare coverage. So now when a person goes on a Medicare Advantage is essentially they're taking over as the primary and secondary. So there's a little bit more paperwork that's involved. So help us to understand, you know, not only for myself, but even for audience, maybe some things that we can share with doctors and for anybody who watches this that can help them kind of navigate prior authorizations or avoid, you know, the declines for them to be just handled appropriately.
Sure. And maybe just for setting this up around information, maybe you could tell me why you think people would select a Medicare Advantage plan over their traditional Medicare or Medigap.
So we always talk about, you know, there's a few different scenarios. You have the person who's aging into Medicare, they're turning 65, or they could be someone who's 7 years of age, and they're that ideal, you know, person, meaning they're extremely healthy, they're proactive in taking vitamins, they exercise, they have good, strong family history of family health. So parents lived in their upper 80s, 90s, and then they just died due to old age, not because it was some form of disease or illness. So for them, they look at a traditional Medigap policy. I'm going to pay $100 and some, $200 and some odd a month in premium, and I'm going to go to doctors once a year. I'm going to do my annual physical wellness visit. That's it. So for them, like, do I want to pay for something I use once a year, whereas I can go into a Medicare Advantage that includes drug coverage. I don't pay a monthly premium. I pay as I go. It provides, you know, the free gym membership. So I'm recouping money by not having to pay for a gym membership. You know, they're getting the free eye exam. They're getting money towards glasses. They're getting some dental coverage, hearing aid benefit. And then there's the over-the-counter benefit, which varies from carrier to carrier and plan to plan. So that's money that they're putting back in their pocket. Otherwise, with a traditional Medigap, that doesn't afford them those same types of benefits. So for them, they find that most attractive. So for them, it makes a lot of sense. So that's one scenario. Then you have the person we sit down with that's turning 65, and they have a bunch of health issues. And so for them to go into a Medicare Advantage at the age of 65, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, because I can go into with a max out of pocket of, $4,500, $5,000, and some are less, some are more. When I can go into a Medigap policy, maybe pay $120 $125, $150 a month in premium. And then I know that if I go to the doctor or hospital, everything's going to be covered 100% with an exception to my, like a Plan G, my Part B deductible, which is $240 in 2024. So all my out-of-pocket expenses for doctor's hospitalization is covered. So, and then affords them, I don't have to worry about referrals or limited networks. So they like that accessibility. But so there's two parts to that. So that person, that makes a lot of sense too. But then you have the person that says, Tyrone, I love what the Plan G offers me. But at the end of the day, after I pay all my bills, I'm left with $50 at the end of the month. So as much as I would prefer entering into a Medigap policy over a Medicare Advantage plan, I don't have that $125 a month available to me to pay for a Medigap policy, which then doesn't also include, I have to pay for my drug plan as well, right? So in the drug plan, depending on, if you have a tier 3 or tier 4 medication, then you're subject to that Part D deductible. For a lot of the plans, they have a $545 deductible, right? That has to be met. So some of those people, as much as they would prefer to go into a Medigap policy, they don't have the financial means. So that's scenario 2. Scenario number 3, we have a lot of those clients that have been with us for 10 plus years. They aged into Medicare, and now maybe early on they didn't have any health issues, whether it be anything that was critical or chronic health issues, but as they aged, they developed those chronic or critical illnesses. So what that does is, one, their premiums increase over time due to inflation, age, and then, loss ratio or claims filed against the insurance carrier, not as an individual, but as the claims increase with that particular insurance carrier. And because that person has chronic or critical illnesses, we can't submit a new application with a new carrier or plan to help reduce their premiums, right? So what happens is their premiums just continue to increase year after year after year. So we find ourselves where people say, you know what, as much as I'd like the Medigap policy, I can't afford $250, $300, $350 or more per month to pay for a Medigap policy. So for them, or if they're fixed costs, when you add in the drug plan, the deductibles, and Medigap premiums, when those premiums now equate to what they worst case scenario max out of pocket with a Medicare Advantage, it makes a lot of sense to transition them into a Medicare Advantage. And so I think part of it is just being transparent about that as well, and kind of walking them through. And so walking through, what do those co-pays look like? Primary care office visits, specialists, urgent care, emergency room, hospitalization. If you're, subject to, the, MRIs, CAT scans, EKGs, and all those. So kind of walk them through, and what that would look like and how you potentially could reach that max out of pocket. And once you reach that max out of pocket, everything's covered 100%. So, and what we've also found too, when people are making that, considering a Medicare Advantage, usually the drugs seem to be a little bit less expensive underneath the Medicare Advantage than they do underneath a standalone drug plan and then a Medigap policy. So we're finding savings there as well, on top of, you're getting the dental benefit and all that. So you have to take that all into consideration. And ultimately, you're just providing that information for them to make it an educated, informed decision. So we don't try to pressure anybody. But with that, so that's kind of, if that answers your question, so that's kind of what leads us to the Medicare Advantage.
It does. And you did a really nice, succinct job of describing 2 or 3 types of individuals that would select a Medicare Advantage. And that's all I'll speak to, is to Medicare Advantage. And so in your first scenario, an individual who doesn't have a lot of healthcare needs, and they still got to spend $2,000 a year on monthly premiums, they want to spend less. And so how is it that you spend less? Something has to be different. Something has to, so as a health plan, a Medicare Advantage plan, we look for ways to reduce I'll say fraud and waste. Those are pretty generic abuse. But what we really do is try to change that trajectory of unnecessary activities. And so when you think about the decision to put a prior authorization, which is a qualification process on any particular procedure or activity or pharmaceutical, the reason you put that on there is because there's overuse, inappropriate use, lack of scientific evidence for things that are asked for. Happens every day. It doesn't matter whether you're at the biggest university center in the country or a little small place up in wherever, Alpena, Michigan. There are requests for things that there is not science behind. And so we block that extra care and say, no, you're going to live under the guidelines. Our guidelines are ones that if you sit in a room with a physician and myself and you, and there'd be no challenging that they're the right guidelines. These are the scientific evidence-based guidelines. However, the hyperbole comes up where the description of, oh my gosh, but this patient's so unique and special. Well, they haven't been tested in that unique and special situation. And so what you're doing is might as well try it, not scientific evidence-based medicine. And so that's a big reason that we do that. There are also reasons we do prior authorization because there are opportunities to provide the same service at a lower cost facility or through the use of an alternative therapy in the pharmaceutical space. And so we do a lot of that activity. That we hear complaints or concerns about. We understand that people are not happy. I think when you talk to any individual, they say, just let my doctor do what they want to do, please. That's kind of how I would be. I have a doctor, so just let him do what he wants, but not really. I want him or her to follow the science and the evidence, and don't prescribe me something that for example, don't give me antibiotics when I got a virus. They don't work. You wasted, and if I got to pay cash out of my pocket, you just wasted my money. Don't do that. And so that's a very oversimplified example, but that's the kind of thing. If somebody has a back problem, for example, and then the provider says, well, I want to do a contrast XYZ CT scan. It's like, no, the right care for that back problem that we're talking about is probably to get an MRI. And so we'll intervene and you'll hear examples. They denied me doing this, denied that. We use science, we use evidence. The federal government has a set of criteria that they require a health plan to follow. And have you heard of NCDs and LCDs? National Coverage Determinants is NCDs. LCDs are local coverage determinants. The federal government checks on Medicare Advantage plans. Said, are you following these? Yes or no? If we say, no, we've got our own set of rules, that no, you don't, you will follow them. And so we sometimes will get, and the most recent one I looked at was a cancer patient, that a provider wanted to do something that then the national guidelines said, no, it doesn't, there's no science for that. But I want to do it anyways. We sent it off to the federal government to review. They pointed right to the NCD, National Coverage Determinant, said, that's not a covered benefit. There's no science behind that. You should not pay for it. And so I hope that broadly answers why we do prior authorization. As much as it at some level we'd all like to say, yeah, just let my doctor do whatever let my hospital do whatever they want. It's okay. It's not okay. And that's how you get the added coverages that you listed for preventive services, for cheaper pharmaceuticals. It's because we're cutting out that non-essential, non-scientific treatment and honing down to do the right things. They're scientific, evidence-based, guideline-based by whether state or federal government. Is that helpful a little? No,
it is. And so one of the things that actually I just read this article last week, and we had I think it was like 2 or 3 of our clients that had sent us emails. They were concerned about a bill, and it was catheter related. Like, I don't even use any catheters. And I think it was a week and a half ago, I'd read an article that the government, there was I wish I could remember I want to say it was in Ohio, but it was a larger company that just got busted for $2 billion worth of Medicare fraud. And one of the things they were using was an inexpensive catheter, kind of like under the radar, but it was the, millions of people that they were using to do this, really inexpensive catheter, but it was the volume in which they were doing, and they finally got caught. And so one of the things that I share with people, with our clients, is that, prior authorizations, and I can understand as a patient, you're in a hospital, you're in a doctor's office where you get this letter and you're waiting for this procedure to be done and or to be administered, and then it's declined. And I said, because there are doctors, there are medical offices that do abuse Medicare and the healthcare system for their own selfish reasons, the government has put these parameters in place and regulations and different things that we have to abide by to hold people to a different level of accountability. Same thing like on my side of things, we have every single year the amount of continuing education and the recertifications that we have to go through each and every single year. Sometimes it's a daunting task at times. You're just kind of like, really, I got to do this again? But it's more of an accountability, or it's in their doctor's office. Plus, it has to be done, properly. And so it's not because they don't want to provide the service, but it's like you pointed out, if there's a test that doesn't necessarily need to be done, then it's unnecessary. Then why would you want to have that test done and expose yourself to maybe a medication that isn't going to treat you at all and may have some negative impact? So I don't know if you agree with that.
That's very fair. That's just another example of, and I really stay away from the word fraud. It's overuse, and
okay.
I just do. And we look for that constantly. We look for prescribing patterns in providers. Our pharmacy system in the background will look for providers that always prescribe 3 medicines instead of 2 for a diagnosis, or try to prescribe outside of, if the federal government and the FDA and others say, hey, this drug's supposed to be used 3 times a day, and we receive a prescription for a month's supply and it's 120, it's like, wait a minute, that's 4 times a day. Our system will catch that, and we'll then block it, and then providers will be very unhappy. And what we want from them, if you're going to say, I don't have to follow the rules, or I don't want to follow the rules, we demand an explanation for that. We allow for those appeals that you talked about, the denials, and then they get appealed. We allow for appeals, and we want to know, oh my gosh, this person's liver does this, and it's a hypermetabolizer. It breaks it down faster, and that's why we've tried 2 a day, we've tried 3 a day. We know they're over metabolized. This individual, because of the way their liver works, metabolizes 4 times a day worth, and that's what we need to use. Oh, okay. We'll listen to that. And I have over 30 full-time pharmacists. I have 9 medical directors who clinically review these denials. We don't have nurses denying things. I'm going to say that because you'll hear that on TV.
Yeah.
The nurses were denied. Never. At priority, never does a nurse deny. They can say, okay, or they can look at it and go, oh, this meets the criteria. Okay. But if it's not meeting criteria, then it goes to a physician to put in their hands and review the why.
That is great information to be shared. So if you were, and I don't know if you actually have your own private practice outside of, working with Priority Health, because I knew some doctors do, but is there any advice? So if there was a doctor or someone who was listening or to watch this video that you could give like advice to, saying this would help avoid any decline or prior authorizations to help mitigate any of that, the issues with the patient or frustration?
Yeah, I think most practices now have teams that are preparing the material and then sending it off to us. And it's in that translation from what the physician said So I want this person to have this procedure done, whatever it is that we're prior authing, and I want it done, and send this person to so-and-so's office to get it done. They submit the prior auth. Well, that person filling the form out, our requirements, and I know we don't want someone to spend 20 minutes every time someone sends somebody up, but our requirements are online. They know that if in fact you have to have had, we use a knee MRI, you need to have had an x-ray of that knee. If you haven't done an x-ray to begin with, then probably shouldn't send it. On the other hand, if you've done an x-ray of the knee and you've got results, by all means attach that to the request for the MRI of the knee, and then we don't have to send you back either denial or it's not approved or a pending, because then it gets into that lot of work for our teams because the right information is not there. And so understanding, and again, most practices have a handful of the things that they commonly send out. So as a family practice provider, you might send out these kinds of things. And so your team, that when you write as a physician or a provider, you write, send for back MRI. Your team should know that the physical therapy notes need to be there, the x-rays need to be there. They should know that. It shouldn't be like, oh, we got to look that up again. It's like, no, almost all of in the Medicare Advantage space, almost all of us have basically the same criteria.
When you say the same, all of us, are you referring to all insurance carriers?
Medicare Advantage. I want to say that's narrow, because we do in our commercial products, providers, employees purchase different kinds of plans. Yeah. They ask for us. Employers say, well, we want this covered and we don't want that covered. We want more of this. We want copay deductible. And so that can look different. So if we stay within the Medicare realm, the NCDs, National Coverage Determinants, and the LCD, Local Coverage Determinants, those are standard with CMS. They just are. So just for clarification, I want to make sure I'm understanding you.
So if it's a Priority Medicare Advantage, a Blue Cross Blue Shield Advantage, or any Medicare Advantage, or stay in the Medicare Advantage world, those same rules apply to everyone?
For the LCDs and NCDs, yes, they do.
Okay. So for prior authorizations, okay.
For those kind of, and there's other things that get prior authorized. And again, what's covered and what's not covered, much of it in the Medicare Advantage world is regulatory.
Okay.
And then we have things within our own organizations that we look at. So there are times, for example, providers will want to, and we'll use the most common one that's out there right now, they want to prescribe one of the GLP-1s, the new medicines that have been around for a while that treat diabetes. They want to prescribe it for someone that's pre-diabetic. Well, the federal government says no on that. You can submit all the criteria you want. If they're not a diabetic, they're not going to be able to take that. Well, you may, as a physician, know in your heart, if they lost 30 to 50 pounds, I know they'll be out there. Guaranteed.
Sure.
So Medicare should pay for it. Medicare says, we're not paying for it yet. It's being considered, but they've said that is not a covered benefit. So
it wouldn't matter how much paperwork you filled out. Part of it is it's not going to change the end result. Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
And that's known. That's known.
Okay.
There are lots of people that still will try. And not that I ever did this when I was practicing, but sometimes you submit things to get the no from the insurance company, so you're not the bad guy. I don't know if anybody ever does that anymore, but I think I might have done that once or twice in the past. Okay. Your insurance company said no, and I knew they were going to say no, but I submitted anyways because I didn't want to be the one to say no.
So Doc, that leads to a question. So if a person, let's say, has a Medicare Advantage policy and using that medication as an example, not that you used a specific name, but a person who is pre-diabetic, not diabetic, and the doctor wants to prescribe this medication, it gets denied, and then that prospective client or client comes back and says, you know what, I don't like this Medicare Advantage, and this prior authorizations denial. And so if they were to go back to a Medigap policy and a standalone drug plan, it would still be denied?
For that particular example, yep.
Okay.
Yeah. At this point in time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's, like I said, I would say probably in the last I don't know if you would agree with this or disagree, but it seems to me, what I've seen in the past 3 to 5 years, like Medicare Advantage plans have jumped leaps and bounds as far as for the betterment of a policy than what they were prior to that, 5 years ago. So I don't know if you believe that or not, but that's just.
I do. I think we've worked really hard at Priority to enhance our additional benefits, what they call supplemental benefits. We worked really hard to figure out how to do a better job with paying for over-the-counter things, paying for silver sneakers. You mentioned that gym classes that are available, exercise classes, how to add additional transportation. We've worked really hard to add on. And there's really no additional, there's still $0 premiums out there. We've worked hard at that. And I think I'll just say other health plans have as well. I'm here to do a sales job.
Yeah. No, and I would say we do business in 19 states, and I would say what I've seen from state to state, I would say Michigan's probably one of the better ones when it comes to Medicare Advantage plans within respect to the max out of pockets being lower, especially for out of network. I mean, Florida, you're $10,000-$13,000 max out of pocket. So, that I think that is, plus their Medigap policies are more expensive down there than they are here in Michigan as well. But they're certainly, I would say, one of the better states for Medicare Advantage here in Michigan. So, well, this has been really enlightening. This is great. And I appreciate all the information you share. I think this will be helpful for a lot of people. There's a few clients that come to mind that, because I know some of their doctors were like giving some pushback. And I said, part of it is, I think as a doctor's office, for me, I have a great supporting staff around me. And so clients tell me all the time how great, everyone is to work with. And they really are. And so, it's important that doctor has a great supporting staff that knows what they're doing. They're processing paperwork properly. And I kind of went round and round with one particular gentleman and his doctor. And I said, well, I don't know. He's not the insurance guy. I'm not the doctor, but certainly I know through experience that a lot of denials are just things are not processed, properly, or, says, hey, I'm putting this through for an MRI. And it's like, but you're having a X-ray done, like it has different codes and stuff like that. So, so I appreciate you again, your time. And I know Mondays are always a busy day for everyone. And so, so thank you. And, I know we'll send you, a document for you to DocuSign just for, consent and all stuff. And so appreciate you. And,
my pleasure. And if there's other topics or you want to go a little more detail, I'm more than happy to do that, but I probably would want to have a question or three before so I can research so I can get a detailed answer. But I'm more than happy to do that. I think the more we can work, all of us work together with your clients, our members, prospective members, and providers, we're all looking to do the same thing. I don't think there's a few shysters out there, but we'll keep working together to weed those out as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great, because I think the common goal is just for people to be educated and informed, and there's so much misinformation out there. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because again, the more educated we all are, the better off we'll all be. And so thank you again. And thank you for everyone watching this video, and please send us a comment or, message us or call the office. And if you have any topics or questions that you'd like us to talk about, with doctor or anybody else, we can invite on the show. So appreciate you. And again, thank you.